Her Royal Highness is, of course, a popular Yorkshire figure herself.
And best known as the Royal at Wimbledon, whose kindness to runners-up won her millions of admirers. Catherine devoted 4 decades to public service and was an inspiration to royals who followed.
She represents the best of the royals. She is the perfect ambassador for the British royal family.
Duchess exposes the royal family secret that will make your blood boil. Her mother-in-law called her that woman. But what her husband did next will leave you speechless. Palace insiders are furious. She's finally talking. You won't believe how this broken woman got the ultimate revenge. The royal family hates her for revealing this one devastating truth that changes everything. Warning, this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about royalty. Last week marked the end of an era for the British royal family with the passing of their oldest member, the Duchess of Kent, at the remarkable age of 92. Her death sent ripples through both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, with official statements expressing deep sorrow for the loss. Prince William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, captured the sentiment simply but powerfully in their tribute. Deeply missed. The Duchess of Kent's passing adds another chapter to the story of royal longevity that has become something of a trademark for the British monarchy. Looking back through recent history, we see a pattern of impressive lifespans among senior royals. The late Princess Alice, Duchess of Gloucester, reached the extraordinary age of 102 before her death. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, lived to 101, while Prince Philip made it to 99. Even Queen Elizabeth II herself lived to 96. Against this backdrop of royal longevity, the Duchess of Kent's 92 years might seem almost typical. But her journey to that age was far from the comfortable path many might imagine for someone born into privilege. The woman who would become the Duchess of Kent began life as Catherine Worsley on February 22, 1933. From the moment she entered the world, she was surrounded by the trappings of British aristocracy, though her story would prove that privilege doesn't guarantee happiness. Her father held the title of baronet, a hereditary honor that placed the family firmly within the upper ranks of British society. Her mother came from equally distinguished stock, being the daughter of a noble family with connections that reached into the very heart of British industry and politics. Perhaps most impressively, Catherine's maternal grandfather was not only a baronet, but also a significant political figure who served as a party leader. His business acumen was equally remarkable, as he was one of the founders of Brunner Monde, a chemical company that would eventually merge with others to become Imperial Chemical Industries, or ICI as it was commonly known. At its height, ICI stood as one of the world's largest chemical conglomerates, making Catherine's family tree rich not just in titles, but in genuine industrial achievement. The family seat was Hovingham Hall, located in the beautiful Yorkshire countryside. This grand estate would serve as Catherine's childhood home, providing her with the kind of upbringing that many could only dream of. Yet despite all this privilege, or perhaps because of it, Catherine's position within her family was quite specific. She was the youngest of 4 children and the only daughter, with 3 older brothers ahead of her in line. This made her simultaneously precious and somewhat peripheral to the family's dynastic concerns. Being the only daughter in an aristocratic family of that era meant that Catherine was cherished in a particular way. Her parents and brothers doted on her, ensuring she received the finest education and opportunities available. However, it also meant that under the traditional rules of primogeniture, she would not inherit her father's baronetcy. This legal reality, which seemed like a mere technicality during her happy childhood, would later become a source of criticism from those who felt her background wasn't quite grand enough for the role she would eventually assume. From an early age, Catherine displayed remarkable talents that set her apart from many of her contemporaries. Music became her particular passion and strength, and she wasn't content with the amateur dabbling that might be expected of a young lady of her station. Instead, she threw herself into serious musical study, mastering not just 1, but 3 instruments. Her skills on the piano, organ, and violin reached such a high level that she was able to give solo recitals, performances that required not just technical proficiency, but also the confidence and stage presence to captivate an audience. These musical abilities weren't her only academic strength. Catherine proved to be an excellent student across multiple subjects, earning top marks in English literature and French. Her intellectual curiosity and academic success positioned her well for the next phase of her education, and she eventually made her way to Oxford University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. At Oxford, Catherine chose to focus her studies on subjects that clearly reflected her interests and talents. She concentrated on music, art, and history while attending one of the university's women's colleges. This was still an era when women's education at Oxford was somewhat separate from the main university structure, but it provided her with access to world-class instruction and the opportunity to engage with ideas and cultures from around the globe. Those who knew Catherine during this period describe her as someone who might not have struck observers as conventionally beautiful at first glance, but who possessed qualities that made her memorable and attractive in other ways. Her blonde hair was certainly striking, but it was her overall presence that people noticed most. She carried herself with a dignity and elegance that spoke to her careful upbringing and natural grace. There was something about her demeanor that suggested both confidence and approachability, a combination that would serve her well in the public role she would eventually assume. The careful cultivation Catherine received throughout her childhood and young adult years was evident in everything she did. Her parents had clearly invested significant time and resources in ensuring she would be prepared for whatever life might bring. She was taught not just academic subjects and artistic skills, but also the social graces expected of someone from her background. She knew how to conduct herself in formal situations, how to engage in conversation with people from all walks of life, and how to represent her family with dignity and poise. Yet even with all these advantages and achievements, there were already hints of the challenges that lay ahead. The same aristocratic background that had given her so many opportunities would later be seen as insufficient by some who felt that royal marriage required an even more elevated pedigree. The rules of primogeniture that prevented her from inheriting her father's title would become a point of contention for future critics who questioned whether her lineage was truly suitable for the role she would be expected to fill. As Catherine moved through her early 20s, completing her education, and beginning to take her place in society, she appeared to have everything going for her. She was intelligent, talented, well-educated, and came from a family with both social standing and financial resources. She had been raised with love and attention, given every opportunity to develop her abilities, and prepared for a life of significance and contribution. What none of those who knew her then could have predicted was how dramatically her life would change when she encountered a young prince at a hunting ball, setting in motion a series of events that would test every aspect of the careful preparation she had received throughout her privileged upbringing. The moment that would change Catherine Worsley's life forever came at a hunting ball, one of those grand social events that brought together Britain's aristocratic families in an atmosphere of tradition and carefully orchestrated socializing. It was at this gathering that she first encountered the man who would become her husband, a meeting that seemed romantic on the surface, but would prove to be the beginning of decades of personal struggle. The young man she met was Prince Edward, and while he may not have been the most conventionally handsome suitor, he carried with him the unmistakable aura of royal blood. 2 years younger than Catherine, Edward possessed somewhat sharp facial features that bore a striking resemblance to his cousin once removed, who would later become King Charles III. This family resemblance was no coincidence, as Edward's position within the royal family tree placed him very close to the center of British monarchy. Prince Edward's full title and position came with a weight of history that few could truly comprehend. He was the grandson of King George V, making him a direct descendant of the monarch who had guided Britain through World War I and the early decades of the 20th century. Family photographs from his childhood show him held by his formidable grandmother, Queen Mary, surrounded by his royal cousins, including the future Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret. These images capture a world of privilege and ceremony, but also hint at the enormous expectations that would be placed on every member of this extended royal family. Edward's father was Prince George, Duke of Kent, a man whose life was cut tragically short during World War II. Prince George died in a plane crash while on active military duty, leaving behind a young family and a grieving widow who would have to navigate the complex world of royal obligations while raising 3 children alone. This tragedy would shape not only Edward's childhood, but also his understanding of duty, responsibility, and the sometimes harsh realities that come with royal status. The woman left to raise Edward and his siblings was Princess Marina, a figure who would loom large over Catherine's future life, in ways that were both inspiring and deeply challenging. Princess Marina was Greek-born royalty, bringing to the British royal family a combination of stunning beauty, continental sophistication, and an unshakable belief in the importance of royal bloodlines. Her own background was impeccable by royal standards, and she had married into the British royal family at a time when such unions were expected to strengthen diplomatic and familial ties between European monarchies. When Prince George died in that wartime plane crash, Princess Marina faced a situation that would have overwhelmed many people. Suddenly widowed with 3 young children to raise, she could have retreated from public life and focused solely on her family. Instead, she threw herself into royal duties with a dedication that impressed even the most demanding members of the royal household. She maintained an exceptionally close relationship with her formidable mother-in-law, Queen Mary. No small feat given that monarchs' exacting standards and strong opinions about how royal life should be conducted. Princess Marina's efforts to uphold the Kent branch of the royal family were nothing short of heroic. She single-handedly maintained the family's public profile, fulfilled countless official engagements, and ensured that her children understood both their privileges and their responsibilities as members of the royal family. Her dedication earned her widespread respect and admiration, but it also shaped her into someone with very specific and demanding expectations about what royal life should look like. As the eldest son, Edward inherited the Dukedom of Kent at the tender age of 6, a responsibility that would define the rest of his life. This early inheritance of such a significant title meant that from childhood, he understood that his future was not entirely his own to determine. He would need to fulfill the duties that came with his position, while also finding a way to live as an individual with his own needs and desires. Edward's education followed the traditional path expected of royal males of his generation. After completing his early schooling, he attended the prestigious Royal Military Academy, an institution that had trained generations of British military officers and royal princes. His time there prepared him for a career as an army captain, giving him both military training and the kind of disciplined approach to life that was considered essential for someone in his position. However, the military training and royal upbringing couldn't entirely prepare Edward for the complexities of choosing a life partner while navigating the expectations of his formidable mother. Princess Marina, for all her admirable qualities and dedicated service to the royal family, possessed what royal experts and biographers would later describe as an incredibly domineering personality. Her years of holding the Kent family together through sheer force of will had made her accustomed to having her way in most matters, and she had very definite ideas about what kind of woman would be suitable for her eldest son. According to biographical accounts written by royal experts who studied the family dynamics closely, Princess Marina held deeply traditional views about royal marriages. She was accustomed to unions between princes and princesses, matches that strengthened dynastic ties and brought together families of equal royal status. This worldview made it extremely difficult for her to accept Catherine's background, despite the young woman's undeniable aristocratic credentials and personal accomplishments. The criticism that Princess Marina leveled at Catherine's suitability was both harsh and revealing of the attitudes that still prevailed in royal circles during this period. According to those who documented the family dynamics, Princess Marina declared that a woman of questionable lineage could not possibly be equal to the task that lay ahead. This assessment seems almost absurd when viewed from today's perspective, given that Catherine came from a genuinely aristocratic family with significant wealth and social standing, her father's baronetcy, her family's industrial connections, and her own education at Oxford would have made her a highly desirable match for most families of the era. Yet Princess Marina's objections reflected the incredibly narrow standards that still governed royal marriages in the mid-20th century. The fact that Catherine was not herself born into a royal family, regardless of her other qualifications, made her suspect in the eyes of someone who believed that only royal blood could truly prepare someone for royal duties. This attitude seems particularly ironic, given that many of today's most popular members of the royal family, including Catherine, Princess of Wales, come from non-royal backgrounds and have proven themselves more than capable of handling their responsibilities. When Edward announced his intention to marry Catherine, the reaction from the royal establishment was swift and designed to test the strength of their commitment. Edward was promptly posted to Germany, a military assignment that effectively removed him from London and made regular contact with his fiancée extremely difficult. Meanwhile, Catherine was encouraged to visit relatives in Canada and the United States, putting an ocean between the engaged couple and creating a situation where maintaining their relationship would require considerable effort and determination. This forced separation lasted for several years, during which both Edward and Catherine had to decide whether their feelings for each other were strong enough to withstand not only physical distance, but also the clear disapproval of his family. For a young woman who had been raised in comfort and security, the experience of having her suitability questioned and her relationship subjected to such obvious manipulation must have been both painful and eye-opening about what her future life might hold. Eventually, Edward returned to London and took the romantic step of sending Catherine flowers, a gesture that signaled his continued commitment despite the years of separation and family pressure. The couple finally made the decision to move forward with their marriage, setting the stage for a wedding that would be watched closely by both the public and the royal family members, who had expressed such strong reservations about the match. Their wedding took place in 1961, and Catherine wore the Kent Pearl and Diamond Tassel tiara, a piece of jewelry that symbolized her acceptance into the royal family, while also representing the weight of tradition and expectation that would now rest on her shoulders. The ceremony marked the end of a courtship that had been tested by both social class concerns and the passage of time, suggesting that this was a couple whose love had survived significant challenges. Yet, as the newlyweds embarked on their married life, those who understood the complexities of royal relationships might have wondered whether surviving the obstacles to marriage would prove easier than navigating the realities of royal life itself. The very forces that had tried to prevent their union would now become part of their daily existence, and the strong-willed mother-in-law who had questioned Catherine's suitability would remain a constant presence in their lives. The stage was set for a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, but would be shaped by expectations, traditions, and family dynamics that few couples ever have to navigate. Love had brought them together, but as many royal couples have discovered throughout history, love and marriage can indeed be two very different things, especially when lived under the intense scrutiny and rigid expectations of royal life. The reality of royal marriage quickly became apparent to Catherine as she settled into her new role as the Duchess of Kent. Her duties were clearly defined and traditional, centering around two primary expectations that had governed royal wives for centuries: bearing children to continue the family line, and serving as an elegant, supportive companion to her husband during official engagements. These responsibilities might have seemed straightforward on paper, but the execution would prove far more demanding than anyone outside the royal family could have imagined. The couple's early years together involved extensive travel as they fulfilled their royal obligations around the world. Their official duties took them to Canada, Ireland, Singapore, and numerous other countries where they represented the British crown at various ceremonies, state functions, and diplomatic events. During these travels, Catherine was expected to maintain perfect composure, engage gracefully with foreign dignitaries, and present an image of British royal sophistication that would enhance the monarchy's international reputation. On the personal front, Catherine and Edward succeeded in fulfilling the expectation of producing heirs, welcoming 2 sons and a daughter into their family. This expansion to a family of 5 should have brought joy and fulfillment, and in many ways it did. However, the presence of children also added another layer of complexity to Catherine's already challenging position within the royal hierarchy, particularly given the continued scrutiny from her formidable mother-in-law. Princess Marina's approach to monitoring her daughter-in-law's performance was both relentless and deeply personal. The older woman maintained what could only be described as a constant surveillance of Catherine's behavior, examining every aspect of her conduct with the intensity of someone conducting an X-ray examination. This level of scrutiny extended to the most minute details of daily life, from how Catherine managed household affairs to her performance during public engagements. The criticism that emerged from this constant observation was harsh and often demoralizing. Princess Marina frequently judged Catherine as being inarticulate during public appearances, despite the younger woman's obvious intelligence and Oxford education. She also deemed her daughter-in-law unsuitable for the demands of public duties, an assessment that seemed to ignore Catherine's genuine efforts to fulfill her role with dignity and grace. Catherine's naturally reserved personality, which she often described by referring to herself as simply a Yorkshire lass, became a particular target for criticism. This self-deprecating description reflected her awareness that she came from a different background than the cosmopolitan royal circles she had married into, but it also suggested a humility that one might think would be appreciated. Instead, Princess Marina seemed to view this modesty as evidence of inadequacy, rather than as a refreshing alternative to royal arrogance. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law never improved despite years of coexistence. According to accounts from Catherine's close friends, Princess Marina's demands extended to virtually every aspect of royal life. She expected perfection in everything from keeping personal journals to managing household responsibilities to fulfilling the complex ceremonial duties that came with being a princess. The pressure was constant and exhausting, leaving Catherine feeling as though she could never quite measure up to the impossible standards being set for her. The situation became even more challenging when Princess Marina passed away from a brain tumor at the relatively young age of 61. While this might have seemed like it would bring relief from the constant criticism, it actually placed even greater responsibilities on Catherine's shoulders. She now had to take over many of the duties that Princess Marina had been handling, essentially assuming the full responsibilities of being the senior Duchess of Kent, while still dealing with the grief and adjustment that comes with such a significant loss. To her credit, Catherine rose to meet these expanded challenges with remarkable grace and competence. Her calendar quickly filled with engagements as she took on the role of patron or held significant positions in 8 different royal institutions. These organizations focused on critical areas including healthcare, education, and elder care, sectors that allowed her to make meaningful contributions to British society while fulfilling her royal duties. The public response to Catherine's expanded role was overwhelmingly positive. People who encountered her during official engagements consistently praised her warmth, sincerity, and genuine interest in the causes she supported. Despite her naturally quiet personality and initial reluctance to give public speeches, she proved to be highly capable and deeply committed to making a difference through her royal platform. However, while Catherine was successfully managing her increased public responsibilities, her personal life was becoming increasingly difficult. Prince Edward, following a pattern that seemed to echo his father's behavior, became largely absent from family life. He showed little involvement with their children and appeared to live with a freedom that was not available to his wife, who was constrained by both royal duties and traditional expectations about maternal responsibility. The situation was made worse by persistent rumors and gossip that circulated within royal social circles. One particularly damaging set of rumors suggested that Edward's sister, Princess Alexandra, was having an affair with Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband. Whether or not these rumors had any basis in reality, they created an uncomfortable situation for Catherine, who found herself the target of gossip and speculation from people who seemed eager to share salacious details about her extended family. Caught between the demanding requirements of royal duties, the challenges of raising 3 children largely on her own, and the constant circulation of family scandals, Catherine began to withdraw from social situations. The naturally reserved personality that had already drawn criticism from her mother-in-law became even more pronounced as she struggled to cope with multiple sources of stress and pressure. The most devastating blow came when Catherine was 44 years old and became pregnant again. This pregnancy initially seemed like a positive development, potentially bringing new joy to a marriage that was clearly under strain. However, tragedy struck when Catherine contracted measles during her pregnancy, a seemingly minor illness that would have catastrophic consequences for her unborn child. The measles infection led to complications that resulted in Catherine delivering a stillborn son at 36 weeks of pregnancy. The loss of a child at such a late stage of pregnancy would be devastating for any parent, but for Catherine, who was already struggling with multiple stresses, it triggered a severe depression that she was unable to hide from public view. In an era when mental health issues were rarely discussed openly, particularly within royal circles, Catherine made the courageous decision to acknowledge her mental illness publicly. This admission was virtually unprecedented for a member of the royal family and demonstrated both her honesty and her recognition that she needed help to cope with her situation. Unfortunately, Prince Edward's reaction to his wife's mental health struggles revealed the depth of his insensitivity and lack of understanding. Rather than providing support during one of the most difficult periods of her life, he reportedly expressed embarrassment about her condition and made dismissive comments about her mental state. According to accounts from people close to the family, Edward told others that Catherine was a crazy woman, showing a complete lack of empathy for someone suffering from a legitimate medical condition following a traumatic loss. This callous response from her husband came at a time when Catherine had devoted herself entirely to both her family responsibilities and her royal duties. Despite receiving little emotional support at home, she continued to fulfill her public obligations and maintain the dignified facade expected of someone in her position. Yet the cold indifference she encountered from the person who should have been her closest ally made her situation almost unbearable. Adding financial stress to the emotional turmoil, Edward proved to be an irresponsible spendthrift who seemed incapable of managing the family's resources effectively. The Kent branch of the royal family had been left a substantial inheritance from Queen Mary, who was renowned for her love of jewelry and had carefully allocated her estate to provide for all her children and their descendants. This inheritance should have provided financial security for generations, but Edward's reckless spending habits quickly began to erode the family's wealth. When Edward's income proved insufficient to cover his extravagant lifestyle, he made the shocking decision to sell valuable pieces from the family's jewelry collection. Among the items he disposed of was the Duchess of Cambridge's sapphire parure tiara, a magnificent piece that was part of a complete set including the tiara, necklace, earrings, and bracelet. This jewelry had been passed down through 5 generations, representing not just monetary value, but also family history and tradition. The sale of such precious family heirlooms represented more than just financial irresponsibility. It was a betrayal of trust and tradition that left Catherine in an extremely embarrassing position. She was forced to be creative with the remaining pieces of jewelry, repurposing elements from sold pieces to create new items. She combined jewels from a necklace to fashion a new tiara and merged 2 bracelets to create a choker, essentially having to rebuild the family's jewelry collection from fragments of what had been sold by her spendthrift husband. The public nature of these sales, which took place at prestigious auction houses like Sotheby's, meant that Catherine's humiliation was played out on a very public stage. She had to maintain appearances at official engagements, while knowing that people in royal circles were well aware of her husband's financial irresponsibility and the family's reduced circumstances. The combination of a cold, unsupportive home environment and the need to maintain a perfect public facade created an almost impossible situation for Catherine. She was living a life where genuine warmth and emotional support were absent at home, while simultaneously being required to present an image of happiness and stability to the outside world. This level of emotional compartmentalization would have been challenging for anyone, but for someone already dealing with depression and grief, it represented an extreme form of psychological stress that few people could have endured without serious consequences. By the 1980s, the strain of maintaining a facade while enduring a deeply unhappy marriage had reached a breaking point for Catherine. The accumulated years of emotional neglect, financial embarrassment, and public scrutiny had taken their toll, and she made the difficult decision to request a divorce from Prince Edward. This was not a choice made lightly, particularly given the royal family's traditional stance on marriage and their historical reluctance to permit divorce among senior members. The royal establishment's response was predictably conservative. Upholding what they considered essential royal decorum, the family did not approve Catherine's request for divorce. This rejection meant that she would have to continue living in a marriage that had brought her little happiness, while still fulfilling the demanding public duties that came with her position. For many people, this might have represented the end of hope for a different kind of life, but Catherine found ways to create meaning and purpose, even within these constraints. One of the most visible aspects of her royal duties during this period was her role as royal patron of Wimbledon, the world's most prestigious tennis tournament. Every year, she would attend the championships, presenting awards to the winners while also demonstrating a compassion that went beyond the ceremonial requirements of her position. Her genuine care for people became evident in how she interacted not just with the champions, but also with those who experienced disappointment on the court. A particularly memorable moment that captured public attention occurred during one of these tournaments, when Czech player Jana Novotná lost a devastating match to Steffi Graf. Novotná, who had been leading in the final set, saw victory slip away and broke down in tears on the court in front of thousands of spectators and millions of television viewers around the world. Rather than maintaining the formal distance that royal protocol might have suggested, Catherine spontaneously went over to embrace and comfort the distraught player. This act of spontaneous compassion resonated deeply with the public, who praised her as embodying the very best qualities of royalty. Here was a princess who understood that her role involved more than just ceremonial duties. She recognized that she had the power to provide comfort and support to people in their moments of greatest need. The image of her consoling Novotná became iconic, representing a more human and accessible version of royal engagement that people found deeply appealing. Perhaps it was this ability to connect with others who were experiencing pain and disappointment that drew Catherine into a close friendship with Princess Diana, despite the significant age gap of 28 years between them. Both women were dealing with unhappy marriages within the royal family, and they found in each other confidants who could truly understand the unique pressures and isolation that came with their positions. Their friendship became a source of mutual support and genuine understanding that was rare in the often competitive world of royal relationships. The two women confided in each other completely, sharing their struggles, disappointments, and hopes in a way that provided both of them with the emotional support they were not receiving from their husbands. This friendship proved to be particularly valuable during some of the most difficult periods in both of their lives, offering a safe space where they could be honest about their experiences without fear of judgment or betrayal. When Princess Diana's marriage to Prince Charles finally ended in divorce in 1996, the aftermath revealed the often cruel dynamics of royal social circles. Almost all of Diana's friends within royal circles withdrew their support, apparently deciding that maintaining their standing within the establishment was more important than loyalty to someone they had claimed to care about. This abandonment during one of the most vulnerable periods of Diana's life demonstrated the conditional nature of many royal friendships. Catherine, however, proved herself to be different. She stood firmly by Diana's side throughout the divorce proceedings and their aftermath, providing the kind of steadfast friendship that Diana desperately needed during this traumatic period. This loyalty was not without personal cost for Catherine, as supporting someone who had fallen out of favor with the royal establishment certainly would not have improved her own standing within the family. Yet she chose friendship over political convenience, demonstrating the strength of character that had helped her survive her own difficult circumstances. By 2002, at the age of 70, Catherine had finally reached a point where she felt able to make a dramatic change in her own life. She requested a separation from Prince Edward, a decision that would involve giving up not only her marriage, but also her royal duties and her Royal Highness title. The fact that Queen Elizabeth II agreed to this request without apparent resistance suggests that even the monarch recognized the impossible situation Catherine had been enduring for decades. The Queen's ready agreement also extended to another significant decision that Catherine made around this time. She chose to convert to Catholicism, a faith that differed from the Protestant religion traditionally followed by the British royal family. This conversion represented more than just a personal spiritual choice. It was also a symbolic break from the institutional constraints that had governed her life for so many years. The Queen's consent to this religious change, given without hesitation, was a clear sign of her respect for Catherine and recognition of the sacrifices she had made over the years. While many people in similar situations might have chosen to maintain their royal titles and privileges, even after separation, Catherine took a completely different path. Rather than clinging to the status and recognition that came with being a princess, she deliberately chose to reinvent herself in the most humble way imaginable. She became a primary school music teacher, working in a school in Hull for 13 years and earning the affectionate nickname Mrs. Kent from students and colleagues who appreciated her down-to-earth approach to her new role. This transformation from princess to primary school teacher represented one of the most dramatic reinventions in royal history. Here was a woman who had spent decades attending state banquets, meeting world leaders, and participating in elaborate ceremonies, now choosing to spend her days teaching music to young children in a working-class community. The contrast could hardly have been more striking, yet those who knew her during this period reported that she seemed happier and more fulfilled than she had been in years. Her commitment to education and music extended beyond her classroom duties. She also gave piano lessons from her apartment near Kensington Palace, maintaining a connection to the royal area where she had lived for so many years, while pursuing work that brought her genuine satisfaction. The fact that she chose to earn money through teaching, rather than simply living off her settlement or royal connections, demonstrated her desire for independence and meaningful work. Perhaps most significantly, Catherine channeled her newfound freedom and energy into founding a music charity called Future Talent, with friends who shared her passion for making music education accessible to everyone. This organization provided free instruments and lessons to underprivileged children aged 6 to 18, addressing a real need while allowing Catherine to combine her musical expertise with her desire to help young people who lacked the advantages she had enjoyed in her own youth. The quiet, reserved woman who had once struggled to give public speeches was transformed by this work. She began giving interviews on the BBC, made countless phone calls to potential donors and supporters, organized programs and events, and worked tirelessly to raise funds for the charity. This activism revealed aspects of her personality that had been suppressed during her years as a dutiful royal wife, showing that she possessed both the energy and the leadership skills needed to create meaningful change. Her contributions to music education were further recognized through her appointments as Chancellor of the Royal Northern College of Music and Director of the National Youth Music Foundation. These prestigious positions allowed her to influence music education policy and ensure that future generations would have access to the kind of musical training that had brought such joy to her own life. Looking at Catherine's life from the outside during her final years, many people saw a woman who appeared to enjoy both longevity and prosperity at the age of 92. The public image was of someone who had successfully navigated royal life and emerged into a comfortable and fulfilling retirement. However, The reality was far more complex, as those close to her understood that she had nearly been driven to despair by the circumstances of her earlier life. The parallels between Catherine's experience and that of Princess Diana were both striking and illuminating. Both women had entered royal marriages with hope and optimism, only to find themselves trapped in relationships with men who seemed incapable of providing the emotional support and partnership they needed. Diana had sought love and emotional connection, while Catherine had eventually found fulfillment through meaningful work and service to others. Yet their fates turned out very differently, with Diana's life ending tragically, while Catherine lived to find a different kind of happiness. In many ways, Catherine's story demonstrates that it's never too late to discover one's true calling and purpose. Her later years, spent teaching music and supporting young people's education, represented the first time in her adult life when she was able to pursue work that genuinely fulfilled her, rather than simply meeting obligations imposed by others. The woman who had spent decades trying to live up to impossible standards finally found peace and satisfaction in the simple act of sharing her love of music with others who could benefit from her knowledge and experience. Her transformation from a struggling royal wife to a fulfilled educator and charity founder offers hope to anyone who feels trapped by circumstances or limited by others' expectations. Catherine's story proves that authentic happiness often comes not from meeting external standards of success, but from finding ways to contribute meaningfully to the lives of others, while remaining true to one's own values and interests.